What started out as a routine court hearing in Newton has turned into a federal investigation into the judge about whether she helped a man evade federal immigration agents. And now the governor is calling for her to be removed from all criminal cases as the investigation proceeds. Back in April, Jose Medina-Perez was arrested on drug charges, was appearing in Newton District Court because of an outstanding drunk driving warrant against someone with the same name. But just minutes into the proceeding, his defense attorney asked Judge Shelley Joseph if they could speak about his client. He explained that a federal agent was outside the courthouse waiting to pick up Medina-Perez in a conversation that was caught on courtroom audio and recently obtained by the Boston Globe.
What if we continue?
Larry, can you go off the record for a moment?
Now, at that point, the court recorder was turned off for roughly a minute, and later, after the hearing ended, the Globe reports Judge Joseph denied the ICE agent access to the courtroom. Medina-Perez was then released from custody and let out the back door, where he scaled a fence and ran off. And while the Globe reports grand jury is investigating Judge Joseph's actions, for now she's still on the bench, which the man who nominated her, that's Governor Charlie Baker, is speaking out about.
Look, judges are not supposed to be in the business of obstructing justice. We'll wait and see what the investigation concludes, but I don't think she should be hearing criminal cases in the meantime.
Now, she's certainly not the only local judge whose actions have come under the microscope recently, but should she be pulled from the bench now before she has a chance to be heard? Joining me to discuss her former state attorney general, former Democratic candidate for governor, Scott Harshbarger. He's now senior counsel at Kasner and Edwards. Scott, thanks so much for being here. John Bennett's an attorney at Goodwin Proctor, and you'll probably remember he represented MIT custodian Francisco Rodriguez, who was detained and held by ICE for more than 5 months. John, good to see you again. So not just Charlie Baker, but the Globe editorial board, pretty liberal-leaning editorial board, say, yes, she should step down from criminal cases. Not forever, but pending the investigation. Are they right?
No.
Why?
The reality, first of all, Shelley Joseph was an outstanding prosecutor.
Which no one is questioning.
A very good defense attorney, is a good judge, and makes a tough decision here. The second is ICE is skulking around again our district courts, which is a whole question of whether this is good policy or not. But thirdly, even after that being said, this is a rush to judgment by the Globe and by Governor Baker, and I was very disappointed in Governor Baker because this is almost Trump-like. Let's use the politics of this to chastise a member of the judiciary when there's a whole process for judicial review that will be undertaken that will determine whether or not this was appropriate conduct or not. I think
this is just temporary. Both he and the Globe were saying just temporarily while the federal investigation is pending, and if they clear, then put her back on criminal cases.
The federal investigation, this is not exactly mass murder that occurred here. This was a routine district court matter in which collateral consequences, Jim, are often considered. Now, granted it's ICE, granted it probably wasn't handled as appropriate as it should, but to turn this into a front-page matter and a whole issue about immigration policy versus the courts and challenging independent judiciary is, to me, a big mistake.
Is it a big mistake, John?
I think I agree with Scott that this does appear to be a rush to judgment in my estimation. I do think that there should be an opportunity for her to be heard as well as the other people that are involved in the communications.
Is there not at least a perception of a problem here? We talk about in judicial settings particularly that we want to remove any perception of impropriety. Can you not imagine a litigant who says there is a concern I have because of her behavior, not judging her guilty, but saying, and during the pendency of this thing, let's just have her step aside?
I guess I have a hard time connecting what might have been her misbehavior here with her duties that she's tending to on a daily basis. And there's certainly no allegation here that what she did with respect to the criminal charges that were at issue was somehow improper. So I think there's not necessarily a connection between what the subject matter of the investigation is with what her job is on a day-to-day basis.
But if I may, just for a second, on the question of impropriety, Scott, it seems from what I've read there are two issues about violation of some sort of court rules. One, the instruction from the trial court is not to hinder or help federal agents. That's up in the air. We don't know. What is not up in the air is this. There is a rule that you don't turn off the recorder. And immediately after there's discussion about, oh, ICE is hanging around, she orders, clearly in violation of court rules, there's no dispute about that, the recorder to be turned off.
Does it not intrigue you that a routine arraignment in a district court in Newton becomes a front pager? Who dropped that dime? That was not the district attorney of Middlesex County. That was not the
who dropped the dime?
The ICE dropped it because they're trying to make a point again that judges are interfering here, and when we as the political people, the governor and others, jump on that, we got to be very careful criticizing President Trump if we're not going to equally criticize Governor Baker for a rush to judgment, a political cover here, when there's plenty of recourse by the court system to resolve this, as John said.
But in all fairness, I mean, the general Trump MO on judges, which I find to be reprehensible and a real problem in terms of undermining the public trust in the judiciary, it's the Obama judges. I mean that rhetorically. It's the judges who are not his. This is Charlie Baker's own appointee.
Right.
So it isn't like he's saying some horrible judge appointed by Deval Patrick or somebody else.
So couldn't you just have said, Chief Justice Gans, would Chief Justice Carey, would you please look at this and I'll await the whole judgment, or if I have a press conference and respond, because this is so politically charged, Jim, that this is catching it up in. There may well be issues here, but to turn it into a front page in the Globe, a major headline about this issue, about a new judge who's a perfectly decent person.
You don't question that it's newsworthy, by the way. And I don't think anybody's questioned she's a decent person. Andrea Cabral served with her in the Suffolk County DA's office, was on the radio yesterday, said a fabulous prosecutor. I'm sure she was. You know, it seems to me the problem is that what's happening, I think you guys, maybe too, I don't know, are conflating one issue where I think there's almost unanimity amongst sane people, which is it's a problem having ICE agents in a courtroom. I mean, it's obviously intimidating to someone who's undocumented, who's a witness or a victim. They're less likely to come forward. That's so obvious. It's painful. I assume we all agree that's a problem. But that's not really the issue here. The issue is the behavior of the judge such that there should be interim action? And you're both convinced she can fully perform her duties with no problems during the pendency of Andrew Lelling, assuming there is an investigation by the U.S. Attorney.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think we know all the details in terms of what the investigation is about.
Yeah, right.
But
and we'll never. By the way, and if he concludes there was no impropriety, she will continue to serve, possibly for a lifetime, and the public will never know.
Right.
Why do you shake your head? We'll never know. They don't say if they dismiss.
What I assume John is. I shouldn't speak for John.
Why don't you speak for you?
Okay,
Scott?
I will. There is a process which will be undertaken within the judiciary to deal with this issue, Jim. I mean, yes, it was Nancy Gertner. Unfortunately, Nancy is viewed as a liberal judge, but saying that there's due process. And Adrian Walker
Nancy
said
wrote
the
a
same
piece. The
thing.
former federal judge was here the other night. Wrote a piece in the Boston Globe saying what
just
you said.
Suggesting that maybe we got to get all the facts, all the circumstances. There are lots of cases where collateral consequences like this come into play. I agree with you. We're all concerned about the recording and that kind of thing. I've been before judges many, many times where they're whispering on the side. You don't cover everything. I just think we have rushed to judgment and turned it into it is the immigration issue.
It's like you're blaming the Globe for this. They didn't do it. They covered what happened, Scott. Right?
How do they routinely cover Newton District Court arraignments?
No, but the facts. Even if you're right that ICE dropped a dime, which is reprehensible if they did that, the issue for them, I hope you would agree, is it newsworthy? If it's not newsworthy,
is it a federal grand jury worthy at this point in time?
What do you mean?
I mean, we're convening a federal grand jury to determine whether an arraignment of somebody who was a fugitive warrant.
So let me propose something that has been driving me nuts for years that might allay a lot of the concerns. There are different interpretations about what the Code of Judicial Conduct says in this stage, which drives me nuts. Well, I understand it says quite clearly, a judge shall not make any statement that might reasonably be expected to affect the outcome of a matter pending. Obviously, that's the case. But it goes on to say, subject to that affecting the outcome thing, a judge may respond directly or through a third party to public criticisms of the judge's behavior. So why, instead of us having this debate, you being angry about the Globe, you being not angry, whatever you are, about a rush to a rush to judgment here, isn't the solution for Judge Joseph to stand up and explain exactly what she did and why she did what she did, and then maybe we won't have it on the front page of the newspaper. Maybe we'll move on. Isn't that what judges should do when there's a question about the propriety of their behavior in a proceeding, as long as they don't prejudice the content of the case?
I agree.
Yes.
But the reality is the judicial conduct, the constraints that judges feel
I just read what
about making, they can say...
Judge may respond directly or
may-
through a third party to public criticism of the judge's behavior, but shall not respond to public criticisms of the substance of a ruling. This isn't the substance of a ruling. It's the judge's behavior. Am I not right? Wouldn't this help allay the concerns that people have?
But again, I think there's a process underway that is designed to get at these questions.
But today she could answer some of these questions. Here's why I ordered the tape turned off. Here's why I did what I did. Here's the concern I have about ICE agents being in the courthouse.
Well, you've got a pending investigation going on, which may involve these questions being asked of her by others.
Before we go, do you agree with him that this is Obama-like on the part of, Trump-like on the part of Charlie Baker?
Well, I think that the concern that I have with Trump criticisms of the judiciary is that it potentially affects the independence of the judiciary. And I think any type of political criticism coming from the political branches, including the governor, like this, does risk the independence of the judiciary, and I think that is very important.
Let's go back. This isn't just about Charlie. I respect Charlie Baker greatly. That's what surprised me about him doing that. That is, it struck him speaking up. We go back to Deval Patrick and the parole board, and a terrible thing that occurred, the release of the parole thing, and the governor fires the entire parole board. I mean, this isn't, I say Trump-like only in that it's somehow or other we've unleashed the dogs here. We're allowed now to have political people are supposed to criticize everything that happens, whether they know the facts or don't know the facts. It's unfortunate, and we have a process. It's the rule of law. And yes, you can criticize Shelley because maybe she violated the rule of law. But there is a process, as John is saying, for working that out, not in the press and not by political people making comments.
Well, for now, I got to release these two dogs.
Sorry.
Nice to see you both. John,
Nice
thank
seeing
you
you.
very much.
You meant that as a
Pleasure.
compliment.
I
That's
meant
all
it in
you
the
did.
kindest way. Scott, it's nice to
Thank
see
you.
you. Thanks so much for your time.